For my first episode, I decided to have you, Dr. Lamourdia, somebody that I admire a lot. I'm honored to have you as the first person on my show. So welcome, sir. I will start first by listing out some of your achievements. You have been a senior soil officer for FAO. FAO is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. You were the country representative in Ghana for a few years, and then later on you became the country representative in Ethiopia, and then you were a country representative to Tunisia and Northern Africa, and then you were also the coordinator for the FAO sub-regional office for North Africa. You retired from Ghana from the office, your office at FAO, and then you moved back to Burkina Faso, which is your country of origin, and you became the Secretary General of the Ministry of Agriculture. And while you were there, you created a circle called the TINFIN, right? The TINFIN circle that is looking to develop the eastern region of Burkina Faso because of the terrorist attacks and the bad situation in the region. You decided to come with a few people to create that association to help the young people to develop themselves, to also develop the region. So the more the region develops, the less we'll have these type of unfortunate situations. You are currently the Chief Executive Officer of the China Yuhong Holdings Group. I'll just jump into it. So knowing you, I know that you are somebody who always talks about patience and hard work. You have been in different leadership positions throughout the years, and you have always excelled, not even just from me, but when I meet people even in different countries and they see my last name, it's like, oh, is this your father? Wow, this is an expert, he's a hard worker. Always compliments. So the first question I wanted to ask is, did you plan to be in these positions? Is it something that you planned from the beginning that, okay, one day I want to be the Secretary General of Burkina Faso? It's not even half of the list of things you have done, but these are the main things, because I think your CV is like 9 pages. And to remind you of a funny story, when I was in university, I remember that my last year, I asked you when I should start applying for jobs or internships when I will finish school. And you told me that you never apply when you have finished school. You have to apply from the beginning of your last year so that you are not under stress. So by the time you finish, at least one person would have responded. And then I asked you to help me write my CV. And you told me that I think you didn't have time. So I asked you to send me your CV so that I'll use it as an example, which was a big mistake because when I saw it, I started crying because I was like, my CV was like half. It was not even a page. It was like half of a page, and even that I had elaborated so much on one thing to be even able to get 5 lines. So I know that you've achieved a lot in your lifetime. So my question is, have you have you ever sat down to plan that maybe in the next 5 years I want to be here, in the next 10 years I'll be here, in the next 20 years, 30 years, to be able to achieve all these things?
Well, thank you very much for having me for this first episode. It's really a pleasure to answer to your questions. I should say that, and also thank you very much for the testimony. I didn't know that it was so impressive to you. But let me say that, as you know, your grandfather, Yardia, was a very hard worker. And he really educated us to follow his traces and make sure that we work hard to succeed. Indeed, even when I was at school, a schoolboy, I had a number of plans. In fact, I wanted to be a military guy, but especially a pilot. This was my dream. And so I really worked for that. And later on it changed. I wanted to be a forester because I had a cousin who was a forester, and the fact of interacting with nature and seeing the the number of the level of degradation. I wanted to be a forester. And unfortunately, when I got my baccalaureate, I was supposed to go to a specialized school in France. And when the school I chosen, I couldn't go there when I reached Paris, and they directed me to another university. And that's how I became a soil scientist. Because there too, I had a professor who was very committed to his work, we were very passionate about soil, and he was able to, to contaminate, between brackets, some of us. That's how I became, instead of being a pilot or a forester, I became a soil scientist by admiration for my professor, but later on by passion. Because the soil is really a living body where you can find a number of opportunities, and it's very passionate to describe soil and see how it can nourish plants and nourish nature. Did I plan to do all this later on? I may say yes, because I had the three key ambitions. The first one is to impact. Whatever we're doing, I want to have an impact. That's why soil for me was important, because it can help have impact on agricultural production. Secondly, from the secondary school, I've always been between the two first students.
Wow.
To keep that in my life, because like your brother said, you don't have to go back, you always have to move on. So from that, my stand was, whatever I do, I should perform well, at least try to be excellent. And the third level is, for me, Africa is really the level, a continent, our continent, where we need to do whatever we can to lift this continent. And when we are doing work as such that people will see that Africans can perform, can be excellent. And lastly, make sure that we'll have and add value when we have responsibilities. That's why within FAO, I may say that I had the unique chance as an African to have done all the regions of the continent at a leading place, except in Southern Africa, but I had a project that was coordinating there. So I was able to exert my leadership in all part of the continent with this free
Wow.
objective in mind. Have an impact, being excellent, and prove in a multinational environment that Africans can add value, they can be excellent, and they can perform better than others, or at
Yes.
least at the same level.
Yes.
So that's how things move on. And I've been a civil servant, you mentioned it. I've been
Yes.
an international civil servant, you also mentioned it. And my dream after my retirement to FAO, from FAO, was to really have an experience in the private sector. That's why when I left the position of Secretary General, where I could have stayed, the minister, the government was really willing that I stay, but I thought there are other opportunities. So when I left this position, I had almost 8 proposals of work, mainly in the private sector. And finally, I
Wow.
decided to take the one of CEO of China Yuhong International Holdings Groups, because there is a component in agriculture, there is a component also on digital aspect, on mine and other aspects. So for me, it was good to having the experience to work in multicultural environment, to work
Yes.
in this company, and also have experience from
Yes.
the Chinese move in the future. How they work, how they plan, and all this. So currently, I'm really enjoying this position because first, I want to be in the private sector, and secondly, I want to work for leading companies, and China Holding is one of them.
Wow. That's very nice. Okay, so going back to one of the things you mentioned, you said you wanted to be a pilot,
Yeah.
and after that, you wanted to be a forester. So, did you ever regret those choices, or you are still okay with the
No,
choice that you made?
no. Finally, I'm okay, and this is also one lesson you have to learn from life. Always seize opportunities. Never lose time in complaining, in regretting. Over, devoted of my energy and complaining. Yes, I want to be a forester. Why do you want me to study science and technique in another university and be discouraged? But for me, I said no. Maybe there's another plan, and I should catch this plan and do my best. So I don't really regret not to be a forester. A pilot sometimes, yes, especially when I'm flying, because I would have loved to be a pilot because this is really in a specific situation. And it was also because I was very good in mathematics and physics. So
Yes.
that's why I thought I could have been trained or have the position of pilot. But definitely, I don't regret at all. And the opportunity, I seize it. I've done my best, and I continue doing my best.
Wow. So, which one was your favorite country of all the countries you've lived in, or where you have served? I know you've lived in Gabon, you've lived in Ghana, you lived in Ethiopia, in Kenya,
Okay.
Tunisia, Burkina Faso, and the list goes on. And you have traveled to different countries also in the world. Which one was your favorite?
What I learned from Africa, for instance, I visited almost 50 countries. So it's remaining 4 countries I haven't visited. I visited all the continent, Europe, Asia, Latin America, and also North America, except Australia, where I haven't been. But what I have seen is that there is a diversity in terms of features, in terms of attractiveness and culture and all this. So each
Yeah.
country has its own value, depending on what you are looking for. It's really difficult to generalize.
Yes.
But I was really impressed. It doesn't mean it's the best country, but I was really impressed by a small country. I may apologize of saying a small country, but in terms of territory-wise, which is Lesotho. Lesotho is really included, surrounded by South Africa. But this is an African country, a very mountainous country, sometimes very cold, where you can really feel the African tradition. They don't have, how do you call it, imported names. If you say your name is John or Mamadou, the first question that we ask you is, you don't have an African country, you don't have an African name, a native name, because there everyone has the Basotho name, which is a local name. They don't have imported names. And it's also a country where respect, politeness is very important. They have 2 words for men and women, which means good morning and also I respect you. When
Wow.
you meet someone, is these 2 words they really say, and it's a very nice country.
Very nice.
Cultural wise, respect and all this across the world is one of the very attractive country in this
Countries.
regard.
Wow. You are very passionate about educating my generation and the current generation. Why do you think that it's important for the young people, the new generation, the younger generation, to be empowered to develop themselves? Because in your book, you mention in one of your chapters that everyone has to learn to develop themselves. You have to ensure that you continuously do that. So you even mentioned in one of the pages that you learned how to upload your own YouTube video and send your own Twitter messages. So you have to continuously upgrade yourself and not just remain at the same place. So can you elaborate a bit on that, on personal development?
Mm. No, indeed, it's very important and very strategical, especially for Africa and for young Africans. You rightly mentioned that I'm leading a think tank, which is called Gulmu Team. And this think tank, we are really trying to train as much as we can of young people. Currently, we have trained almost 250 of them on leadership, how to be a leader for personal development, for career development, and also for making a difference at country and continental level. So, learning and training are key issue for Africa. Those of my age and experience, our role is really to train as much as we can young people so that they can succeed. And also, young people have to really learn, and learn. I had the opportunity to attend, hundreds of workshops, of international conferences, and all type of gathering. What I noticed 3 things. The first one, when there's a training, an European or an African or an American can even take a loan to go for the training. Second thing, when there's a training, the African, you have to invite him to pay everything, his ticket, his accommodation and all this. And he can even complain that the money you are giving him is not enough. At the international level, Africans, policymakers, and all UN technicians, we are always complaining. And sometimes, let me take the case of climate change, we don't really have data. Very few of delegates really come prepared, being a high-level expert to discuss this issue. We usually wait for others to present the data, the trends, and give the point of view. And now we start complaining, no, we are not the one who destroyed the planet. How should we, you should help us, we should do that. Forgetting that the world of today is a matter of even either you are competent, either you have the resources, or you have the political power. If you don't have none of them, you don't count at international level, you don't count in gathering. So the new generation should understand that. The issue is not to complain about colonization, slavery, and all this. This has passed. Now let us catch the new tools, the new opportunities to make the difference. If you take the case of China, I had the opportunity to work with Chinese in FAO and currently with them. I mean, the focus of China is that in 2049, they should be the lead country in the world. So this is already planned, and they are putting whatever they can in terms of knowledge, in terms of science, in terms of data, in terms of investment to reach there.
Yes.
You see. But we, if you take at continental level or even at the youth level, we are more succeeding in complaining. Yes, this world is not, just.
Life is hard.
Huh?
Life is hard.
Life is hard. So that's what we think we should change. And that's why learning, knowledge, mastering science and technology or even art are very important so that tomorrow we can really succeed.
Wow. Following up on that, do you think it's important for the younger generation to learn from the older generation? Because as young people, sometimes because of the youth, we are very excited. We don't like to listen to older people. But even in your book, you mentioned something about um, learning from the elders, and you also told the story of the king who always took decisions with the elders around him because he didn't want to make a decision based on ignorance. So I want to read one of the quotes. The emphasis on learning is evident in discussions at the palace. The chief or the king made decisions based on democratic principles. In other words, he wanted to learn from his elders. No one wanted to make a decision based on ignorance.
Yeah,
Leadership Africa 21.
absolutely.
25 principles for excellent African leadership. It's a nice book, by the way. I really enjoyed reading it. You also mentioned that many of the solutions that are expressed in stories, African stories that we have, that the old people say, there's always a lesson in it. And that many of the solutions in the olden days, many of the solutions were expressed through these legends and tales that the elders used to tell under the moonlight around the bonfire. In this current state that we are, why do you think that it's important for the younger generation to listen to the older generation? And just to add one more thing, there's another quote that you said that great listening skills is one of the rarest skills in the world because most people don't like to listen, and I'm even guilty of that. I talk more than I listen. So I think that is a problem that the youth has, and if we can just learn from the older generation, things that they learned, the challenges that they had, and as you said again in the book, that history repeats itself. So if we don't learn from the lessons, we are bound to just continue in the same cycle. So can you elaborate on that, please?
Thank you. In fact, usually what you forget is that we have all been young before, and at a different scale. We were really in a hurry to grow up, to take decision, to move on, not lose time and all this. But the difference in our time, like you rightly mentioned from the quote, we had opportunities to interact with elders and really pay attention to what they were doing based on experience, because it helped avoid a number of mistakes. That's why, and also, we have built up our skill in terms of listening. Listening is something very important. And this book, if I've written it because we always think that leadership is from European or American perspective only. We never realize, internalize that in our own cultures across the African continent, the Caribbean, and all, from African descent, we have leadership embedded in our culture. You just
Yes.
need to pay attention to it. So if you are in a hurry, you cannot pay attention to it. We are very happy to hear that, for instance, Gandhi say you have to walk the talk, but forgetting that in our
Yes.
own culture, walk the talk means for the leader, if he decides after listening to all the stakeholders, if you
Yes.
take a decision, the decision should be applied by the community with him as a lead.
Yes.
And this is essential. So listening is also an opportunity to learn from those who went through this type of situation and also draw lessons. Like you mentioned, the legends draw a lesson. We can help the young people, the community as a whole, to move on a good basis. So it's really, for me, it's important to pay attention to what the elders are saying. The
Yes.
elders are at the center of the society and the community. You can see now, for instance, in Europe, they are coming back. Before, when you were 18 in a number of countries, you just move on, France or Germany and all this. You are paying attention to your parents. But today, because of jobless, lack of job, you have a number of people who are living with their parents. And that's how they start discovering all the richness they can get. And what they lose, not to have time to discuss with them and to really pay attention to what they are doing. Because we are in a world where we have two ways of living. You have what is called the democratic approaches, where the individual is at the center of everything. He doesn't care if his family, his village, his community, or his country is in a bad situation. What is really important, what matters, is him as an individual. This is, for instance, Europe, America, this is a trend. But now you are seeing emerging from Asian, African, another way of living, which is to put the family, the community at the center of
Yes.
the move. And it gives more psychological comfort. It gives more sharing of knowledge, and it also helps the young people to avoid some of the mistakes. So that's why it's really important. It doesn't mean that the elders have solution to everything. But if you have a good interaction between both, the elders will learn from the fast-moving world currently with digital aspect, and the young people also learn from all the cultural background, how to protect nature, how to read given the nature, how to
Yes.
put more comfort in the relationship between families, communities, and even have a more attractiveness for their own country and their continent and all this. Because these aspects are also very specific to the African continent, and I would say to the African continent and the African desert. So we really need to see how we can improve. It should not be exclusive. It doesn't mean it's only the young people should listen to the elders, but the elders should also pay attention to the needs, the diverse aspiration who are not the same from their own experience, and see how with all this that can also cope with the current world. And it will also give them more usefulness in terms of reflecting, in terms of advising, and in terms of helping these young people to move on. So
Wow.
it's an interaction between both. For it should not be
Two good
exclusive.
generations. Yes. When you say somebody loves Africa, yours is like at another level. Why do you love Africa so much? That's number one. And number two, why do you have hope for us at this current state where we are going, the amount of progress that we've done in like 60 years of independence?
Yes, I do have hope. But let me first respond to your first question. Why do I love Africa? I love Africa because I've been really the first. One of the first reading was about slavery, and also at secondary school when they were explaining how Africans have been slaves and so. Because when you are from a city in the eastern part of Burkina, and at a young age you haven't been out of this city, you cannot imagine what is happening in the world. You hear about Africa, but you have no idea of how does this stand, except on. So I love Africa because we really went through harsh, difficult situation, but we survived it, and it's important. Let me give you a testimony. I've been to Argentina. When you are in Buenos Aires, it's very difficult to hear, how do you call it, the indigenous people, Indian native, really speaking even their own language. They only speak
Oh,
Spanish and all this. But in Africa, despite the slavery, despite the colonization, despite the cultural domination, when you go in the villages or even in cities, and sometimes even in Europe, you hear
yes.
Senegalese talking their own language. So we are resilient despite all this. And secondly, there's an issue of justice. I personally don't like injustice. So
Yes.
this continent, I really face very difficult situation based on racism, injustice, and all type of situation, wrong situation, bad situation. So there's a need for us to wake up.
Yes.
And we also, despite that, we have a beautiful continent, rich in terms of environmental, in terms of potential for resources enormous, and
Yes.
just above all that is cultural richness. I've been passionate because I think we have to take a kind of revenge on history. We have to show that we are not those people think we are. And for that, we really have to battle. And that's why I have hope. I have hope because in our times, for instance, professor of mathematics, physics, and even French, they were French people. They were not black people. Today, you cannot have teachers in university, even at a university, who are white
Yes.
or European or American because of the lack of capacity. That means the countries were able to build up their capacities.
Yes.
You can have experts who are coming. This is normal. It's part of the change worldwide. It's normal. But because of the weak capacities of institutions or school or universities, you cannot see this current situation. This situation currently. So that means it has been a huge move, few decades back from now. It's been a huge move. Secondly, when you look at what is happening worldwide, you can see in UK, in United States, in Europe, young Africans or African descent who are, performing extremely well. Uh, so some are doing the university at 16 years age, or some are, coming up with new invention. And when
Yes.
you look back in the history of US, you can find many discoveries who has
Yeah.
been done by black people.
Yes.
So it means we have the potential. It means we were able to start building up. Now we are at a stage, digital area, what is called the Facebook generation, where information, knowledge sharing is moving fast. And Africans were able to seize these opportunities. When you take the case of the mobile banking, and it has been built up from Kenya, from a young guy who was doing his internship within a bank. Today, in all continent, he was doing his M-Pesa at a bank and tried to embed M-Pesa, who was a mobile, into the system. And now it's working worldwide and particularly across Africa. So we were able to use tools and to put it in a very pragmatic way that it serves the country, the continent and countries. Now, the challenge, because we are very good at using, promoting, repairing, and we are all very good at it. But we are also good in invention. But the problem in our countries is that we don't have the structural context to really promote this invention in terms of lifting fundamental sciences. So usually all the fundamental sciences concepts are elaborated elsewhere, and now we are just applying. So that's where we should make a difference. We should start applying, not only applying but also inventing.
Yes.
Sometimes you hear that there is an African drone who has been made, an African helicopter, but when you look closely, it's only African because of the, how do you call it, bringing the pieces, the part together. The part has been made elsewhere. It's not us who invented the
That's true.
part.
Yes.
The engine doesn't come from an African,
Manufacturing company.
manufacturing company. We buy it somewhere, we try to make some difference and say we have enough. It's not enough. China, India, and all these countries, that's not what they're doing. They will buy the generator, look at what is in, build the port, their own generator.
Yes.
And you take the case of Iran, they have been banned, but currently they are producing their own jets and their own planes.
Yes.
Chinese are producing their own planes. India have sent a satellite on the world based on their own capacities. So that's where we should move to make sure that we are really building up our own destiny. So I'm very optimistic. I think that you, the new generation, with all the tools you have, you should be able to fill this gap and take up this challenge to make sure that we are really building by our own capacities, intellectual, potential in terms of minerals and all what is needed, and also structural, but embedding or rooting all this on our traditional knowledge, on our traditional value, cultural value, that will make the difference and the specificities of our product, approaches, and services according to what we really feel as African to give to the rest of the world.
Wow. Thank you very much for that. So, do you think that people are born leaders, or you acquire the skills and you become a leader? In the younger generation, and I would say more in Africa, leadership is a problem. So, do you think that leaders are born leaders? There are people, that a set of people in the world that are going to be leaders, and until we find them, then nothing can be done, or we can learn the skills and become good leaders? And if so, what are the skills, the attributes that a good leader should have?
Yeah, thank you for this interesting question. You know, first, there is a misunderstanding. People usually, when you talk about leaders, they think more about political leaders than social leaders,
Yes.
industrial, and all this. And secondly, in the case of Africa, like I said, we shouldn't forget that we have all the basis, the tools, and the means to, in terms of and concept, in terms of leadership. But in the case of our cultural value, it depends on where we are coming from. If you are from a royal family, from your teenage, there are things you shouldn't do. For instance, in our case, you shouldn't, from your teenage, you should not even have the right to cry, because as a prince, it doesn't fit well to see you cry.
I remember that.
Eh? You shouldn't complain because you are angry, because as a prince, you should be able to go beyond anger. You should always, how do you call it, have in mind to give good examples. When you are a schoolboy and you see old people who are kneeling down and say, "My prince, good morning," it gives you a sense of what you have been taught in your family. It gives you a sense of responsibility.
Yes.
So at least it builds up really your leadership at your teenage. And
Yes.
in all cultures, that's what you see. In Japan or UK, those who are from royal families, the code and conduct you have to respect. So to respond to your question, that's why I was saying it depends on what you are coming from. So if you are coming from such family, you already have a kind of good background to move on.
Yes.
But basically, leadership is about three things. First, you have to learn, even from a royal family or a chief family. You are educated, so you have to learn. Secondly, you have to be, how do you call it, perseverant. Despite the difficulty, the job is to focus on where you want to go. And thirdly, you have to have an ambition, a vision for your own and for your community. And this ambition and the vision is really key. From whatever component of the society you are coming, if you have a vision, an ambition, you are perseverant, you already have a good background to be a leader. Because you will move on, you will inspire people, you will move according to your vision, you will try to share such vision around with your friends, around yourself, in your environment, and this is already a good background. So, education, learning are key in terms of moving on to be a leader. Personal engagement, commitment is also key to agree with yourself to remain a leader. That means to confront a number of difficulties. And thirdly, you have to be ambitious and positively ambitious, which means you should not be distracted or you should not be discouraged when you meet a number of challenges or difficulties. You should be able to compose, you have to keep yourself composed and to move on. So for the new generation, what I will say is really to have a clear vision on where, as an individual or a community, you want to go. What is the difference you want to make? Secondly, you have to be able to capture all opportunities. Focus on what is positive instead of focusing on when you fall down, you have difficulty, you start complaining and all this. And like I say, in our society, we have a really good aspect related to them. When you know the history of your family, you know the history of your community, you know the history of your village,
Yes.
and you are facing difficulties, you can really take some energy from that. If you are someone who is jobless, instead of complaining I'm jobless, if it was in the past, they will tell you, but your father, he was so a valiant, a brilliant guy, very courageous. When he came, he was facing difficulties, he went and started farming, and he was one of the respected farmers within the community. Or he was one of the respected warriors in the community, ready to defend the community of the village. So when you hear that, you have no reason not to do at least at his level to keep his name, and if you can, add something so that commonly your name will move on. You see? So that's why, again, listening to others, knowing your own story, the story of your father, your grandfather, your grand-grandfather, as much as you can, it gives you a number of opportunities, a number of means that will help you confront the world of today. You may say you are not in the same way, but like your mom used to say, the sun is still rising from the east. It doesn't matter if you are in the Facebook generation or
Yes.
so there are a number of laws who remain the same. We just need to contextualize, to put it in a new perspective, using new tools and putting all together to succeed. So, to my view, that's one of the aspects you should pay attention to it. And again, it means there are good interaction, complementary interaction between elders and the new generation, so that the new generation can also have a good vision, move on, and build its leadership.
Wow. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that those that will watch will also learn a lot. And for those who don't know, this is a book, Leadership Africa 25 Principles for Excellent African Leadership. He has other books too, but you can start with this one. And you can purchase it on Amazon.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
So thank you, Dr. Thiombiano, for having us, for giving us the honor to be the first guest on our show.
Thank you very much. And
Yes.
I'm also proud of what you are doing. It's a good thing. It really fills a gap, like we said, for this interaction between generations. And I wish you all the best, and it will be always a pleasure to respond to your question. So good luck for the future, and
Yes.
à bientôt.
À bientôt. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Bonne soirée.
Sorry, merci.
So, viewers, thank you very much for joining us. And we also thank Mr. Thiombiano again, Dr. Thiombiano, for his time with us. And we are looking forward to another conversation again with him when he will grant us another interview in the months or years to come. I'm sure we'll have that opportunity.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you
So
very much.
I hope you enjoy the conversation and you are learning a lot from these amazing, interesting answers that he has given to us. And this is a great man. This is one of the people that I admire in the entire planet. So enjoy.